special mystery guest. It's Jessica on Agile Podcast today. Thanks for coming. Oh, you shouldn't start your podcast like that. You should start your podcast manic so people can get enthused about it.
Yeah.
Like, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Podcast. All right. We got the special mystery guest, Jessica. Does this voice impress you?
I'm impressed.
Oh, okay. Well, why the Scrum Master isn't required in meetings, is not required in meetings.
Yes. Let's argue this topic, right? First off, is there anyone that believes that the Scrum Master should be in all meetings?
In all meetings?
In all meetings.
Heck no.
Yeah, it's the people that are concerned that they don't need Scrum Masters at all. Those are the people.
Oh.
Yeah. Those are the people that need to be like, oh, what are you doing with your time if you're not in this meeting? What else are you doing with your day?
This is our favorite topic. People that are focused on utilization.
I had somebody tell me that once as a Scrum Master.
Do what?
I had somebody tell me that once. What else are you doing with your day?
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
So they clearly didn't see the value you were bringing.
Yeah, no, and they certainly were not shy about it either.
Yeah. So how did you respond?
Well, I can tell you how I responded, and I can tell you how I, in retrospect, how I should have responded.
I want to hear both.
So, it was not anything confrontational. I remember that.
That's impressive.
This is the person who owned the budget for the whole program. Oh, so I wasn't going to tell him, I've got sickies to show what I do on my day. What do you do with your day? I probably responded diplomatically because that was early in the contract at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and they really didn't want me there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably responded something along the lines of, do you like knowing that all your teams are aligned with what your plans are as a product person? That's what I do all day. Because the product person, he wasn't serving as a product owner on any of the teams. I was basically proxying the product owner at that point. I was a skilled Scrum Master, but I was also some way, shape, or form playing block and tackle for product. Because product was disengaged in that program.
I might have been tempted to ask, how would this information help you? What's the rationale for you to ask that question, right?
Also, another good one would be, what do you think I do with my day? That would have been a good one. To answer a passive-aggressive question with a passive-aggressive question.
That will be later on in the contract.
I mean, clearly, he just thinks that you manage the meetings, right? You're the facilitator, and that's it.
Probably. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the only value you're bringing.
Well, I think it was more he was being forced to adopt Agile by the organization, and he wasn't happy about it. That's why he chose it. Plus, I remember that particular confrontation was in front of the whole program. It was like if someone decided to pick a fight during a PI planning in front of the whole room. That's what that was.
Sounds like a power play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was certainly a power play.
Yeah.
Because I was new to the program. Yeah, at the time. And I remember I responded diplomatically because it was a contract again, stuff like that. Now, knowing what I know now, being able to go back, knowing the list of the whatever 20 plus things that a Scrum Master does, I would have a different answer.
Which would sound like?
I influence leadership. I try to build relationships. I try to unblock the team. I try to build a better process and eliminate waste throughout the organization from top to bottom, from the team level all the way up through. I maintain all of your boards, so I maintain your communication, your lines of communication, basically. You know. But I have a backlog of process improvement items, which I did at that point in time. In retrospectives, we would put items in a bucket of what did get done, so we could track the retrospective items, and then they would be assigned to me in that program, and I would carry the retrospective items forward and make sure that they were getting worked. So the reverse of that would be, show me where your work lives. Like, show me what your day to day. What did you do yesterday? Really want to get into a fight and get fired? That would be the route to go. Show me your executive Kanban board. Show me what's in your backlog. Oh, you can't.
This goes back to that topic yesterday. But anyway, I don't want to go back there. I want to focus on this question. Scrum Master should be in all the meetings. All right, so Scrum Master should definitely be in all of the sprint events. Unless there's dire circumstances, they should be there, because without them, things can go off the rails and the team will just keep going down that path. Well, if you're not there to kind of bring them back. For sprint events, Scrum Master should be there.
Well, doesn't the Scrum Guide, not disagree with you, but doesn't the Scrum Guide say the daily stand-up is for the developers to figure it out? And like, you can be there, cool,
right?
But you don't necessarily need to be there. I understand, you probably should be there.
Definitely, it says that, right? Yeah. But I would also say, if you're not there for a day or so, no big deal. You just ask them to self-organize. Yeah. But if you're not there more often than you are there, you'll find that the team will probably go back to what they know best, which is the 3 questions, right? And somebody will say, well, yesterday I came up with this beautiful way of delivering to stage. Like, that's great. But if you're there as a Scrum Master, you might say, how is that furthering our sprint goal, right? Let's bring it back to that, because that's why we're here. For the whole sprint, we're supposed to be delivering a sprint goal. So it doesn't matter if you worked on something bright and shiny that's exciting. If it's not contributing to the sprint goal, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. That's the value of having the Scrum Master there. You don't have to necessarily run the meeting. And I personally prefer not to run the meetings. I prefer them to self-organize and just run the meeting. It's their meeting. Mm-hmm. But you're there as soon as they deviate too far. You're there to kind of act as, the guardrails, right? To come out and you go, well, listen, we should be doing this. Mm-hmm. And then you back off again. But if you're just not there for extended periods of time, I fear that they will gravitate away from what they need to be doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess there's some job security in that, right? Like, listen, we coach them, we got them up to speed with the process, but they still need us to bring them back, right? I can see that as being true because you can kind of get promoted. You promote yourself from Scrum Master more so as a coach now, right? You're not so much mentoring, you're coaching, you're making sure that they're on the right path. You can confirm that. But like, I bring this topic up because I was in a conversation recently and they were saying a Scrum Master wasn't attending refinements and leadership was acting like this was a problem. So I started asking questions. I was like, why is it a problem? They're like, well, it's part of their job to be in the meeting. I was like, why?
To do what?
Do what?
Yeah. 5 whys.
There's a big star next to this one for me as a product person because a Scrum Master being in a refinement, like you have a lot that you can add in a refinement because you can take the wheel and you can be driving in a refinement, actually writing down what people are saying, and you free up the product person's hands to be able to be investigating and pull up different tabs and chatting with people on the side and figuring things out. The product person has a lot to do in refinement other than typing on the screen for everyone to see, which is what a lot of product people probably do in a refinement, hopefully, rather than just sitting there bored while the Scrum Master types and developers talk. Like,
or the BA types.
Or the BA types, yeah.
Jeez.
I definitely see things that the Scrum Master could do to add to in refinement, but quite honestly, I guess I'm arguing with myself at this point. Because if they're not there, anybody else could do that.
Right.
Any of the developers could do it.
Yeah.
And also, if absolutely no one wants to, I could do it. Like if it was a new team, like that's what I'm saying. If it was a new team, I could do it and tell everyone, like, this is how we do it. Present the screen. We're going to walk through. I'll show you some examples. I'll pull them up on screen. I don't know. I don't even really know what point I'm trying to make at this point.
I mean, I would agree with that, right? So that was where I was coming from. That's why I was asking questions. Yeah. So were they doing what they needed to do? Was the backlog healthy? Were they prepared for planning? Who was taking over? Oh, the product owners. That's what happened, right? The product owners just got comfortable. They understood the process, so they took over refinement. So the Scrum Master would pop in at times, make sure they were on the right track, confirm it, right? He would meet with the product owner separately, seeing like the backlog was healthy, prioritized. So he didn't have to attend. Instead, he utilized that time to provide value elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was disputing this. I don't really see that he's needed to be in this meeting.
I could certainly see, like, if you're the Scrum Master and you have meetings with other people organizationally to try to knock down blockers or do something else, I mean, if there's a meeting as a Scrum Master that I'm going to skip, I mean, refinement, it was probably one of the easiest to skip and be okay with.
It's for the benefit of the team, really. So, yeah, I agree. But the other thing I have to say here is perception's reality. So if the Scrum Master is definitely doing something more valuable, make it visible, right? Otherwise, leadership's like, well, where are they? Why aren't they here? We don't know what they're doing. So, and this isn't everywhere, but this is quite a few places where the focus tends to be more on utilization, right? We're paying for a full-time Scrum Master. Mm-hmm. So as long as they're aware. So here's one of the things that I've done reasonably successfully is decline the meeting and just say why. And just say I'm meeting with blah, blah, blah to blah, 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 right? So people know. And if that meeting is over with and I have time, I'll pop in just to see how things are going. Maybe they're done, or maybe they're just in some heated debate or going down rabbit holes. So just pop in. And so that's also the expectation you saw. You just say, well, I may pop in and out because I'm in other meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I do that a lot. I decline meetings and I add a note to the decline about what I'm doing at that time. I mean, that doesn't stop people from doing the finger pointing thing. Right. Organizationally, like if you have that in your culture, it certainly doesn't stop it. But at least you have a reason, a documented reason. You can look back at the meeting when someone calls you on it and be like, well, I put in the invite,
right,
XYZ or whatever. But it's a product owner's meeting. I guess I am arguing with myself because it's a product owner's meeting to drive forward. I really don't need the Scrum Master because I have enough stuff when I get to a refinement to talk about with the team to really beat up, where I don't really know. I got to be honest, like now that I'm thinking about it, like I don't know how valuable a Scrum Master is in my refinements. I really don't know what they could do. Maybe some time boxing facilitation skill to add to be like, hey, we're not making progress on this topic. Do you want to maybe move on to another work item? For me personally, I have such a background in that kind of stuff. I'm very aware of the time box.
Right.
And I'm very aware of when we're not moving. There are times when I'm okay basically running the whole refinement on one single work item because I know it's important to the business and I know it's important to capture all the what could we do with this type of activities. But I don't know, if you're spending the whole refinement on one single work item, there are potentially other sessions, impact mapping sessions and discovery sessions that you could spin off a separate meeting for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So I was telling you guys about my situation. I have 3 teams and I've been working with them, and it's forcing me to look at my calendar each day and say, what do I need to go to? Because I'm triple booked, in these hours. What do I need to go to? So I started skipping some of them, right? Just out of necessity.
Yes.
And the ones that I found myself skipping were the daily stand-ups, the daily Scrum calls.
Sure.
And then, of course, meeting with them after, seeing how everything went, following metrics, making sure we were still tracking in my free time. But during those hours, I would have someone else take over and facilitate that was on the team, right? And in refinements, like we talked about, like I would have the product owner step up and take over there.
Yep. Congratulations, you're an Agile coach now. You can ask for $20,000 more. If you have dashboards and you have metrics for all your teams, and you check in with people, I mean, you have 3 teams. Like you already have one too many teams. Or sorry,
two too many teams.
You already have 2 too many teams.
Yeah.
You're right. And also, if you're checking in with your teams, and you're also checking in with leadership, you're doing what you can.
Yeah, I mean, so sometimes what happens is the Scrum Master says, in the refinement, whatever is refined in that session, we're going to end the refinement session by estimating those out because it's top of mind. That's probably a good practice. I certainly encourage that. Otherwise, if you have a separate detached meeting for estimation, people are going to go, what was that about now? Can you remind me? And that's just spinning, right? So if that's the case and you're facilitating the estimation process, okay, well, show up for the last 5 minutes of the hour, right? You could easily estimate. I'd say you could probably estimate between 6 to 10 items in 5 minutes. They've just refined them in that hour, right? Or hour and a half, whatever the time box is. So everybody should know what was just discussed. So you simply pull that up and go, okay, go vote, and then have that discussion. Now, some of those will precipitate a deeper discussion when you have a wide variation, but not all of them will. If that is happening on your refinement sessions, then even that, I would say over time, you could delegate to one of the team members. I do that with BAs. BAs I'll create the sessions because they're just learning how to in the tooling, but they like it because it's kind of fun. They pull that up and they watch others, select their votes and they reveal. And so you don't have to be the person doing that.
Yeah.
What about, I just thought about this one, the sprint review. When you have customers in the room, like, do you need a Scrum Master? Because theoretically, like the product owner should be running that whole meeting. And the developers show up to do the demos, and they're going to be, you're going to pass the ball to them when they're doing the demo. So, like, the product owner should start the meeting. The product owner should walk through. This is the goal. This is what we did. This is what we did in pursuit of the goal. I mean, they really should be facilitating the whole meeting. Would that be one that the Scrum Master could skip?
Potentially, I would say. I mean, it depends on what you're covering during your review, right? So a lot of teams will cover how the sprint went.
Yeah.
X number of people were out for Y number of days, stuff like that. And these aren't discussion points. These are just data points. Like, this is what happened.
They're just data points. But
anyone can do that.
You can hand it off to a team member as long as they understand how to read dashboards and as long as they understand what the metrics to the team mean. I think that's... Refinement aside, I think the sprint review is probably an easy one to offload. Like if you have like me in a program where I had like 6-7 teams or whatever, I'm looking to save as much time as possible, right? So if I'm looking to offload Scrum purists are like yelling at the screen right now, like, well, you should never have more than that. Yeah, okay, all right. But in reality, you have to look to offload meetings because the organization just won't hire another Scrum Master. You're trying to climb that mountain, but like it's a mountain, okay? Like,
Yep, it is.
Who's climbed mountains before? Okay, the review, offload that one.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have maturity in your team where they're listening to the stakeholders and documenting stuff, the feedback, etc., these aren't hard things to offload.
Yeah.
So you can do that. But again, the purists will say, that is a Scrum event.
Maybe
you should attend it.
If you're not there to facilitate, maybe you can help them by building the agenda. Like, this is the agenda you should use to run. I like a lot of people like use slides. I'm super famous, notorious, whatever, for resisting at all costs using slides in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
Same.
he is the same way. I
Same,
remember working
exactly
with
the
him.
same.
I love that.
I should show a dashboard and go, this is how it went. All right, developers will pick up from there, do a demo.
No, I would
I learned that from you. I still dispute that in my current organization because of what I learned from you.
I want to show the top of the backlog. I want to show the sprint. I want to show at a high level, just the story, just the sentences that make up the stories. Because if you can't read the story title and have an understanding generally what it means, I mean, your story titles are garbage. They really need to be revised. Whoever you're inviting to that session, they likely already know what the work you're working on entails. So they should be able to read the story and be like, oh, you're going to add this to this report. Okay, that's what you're doing. I understand it. Or you're going to make this new field available in this data product or whatever.
But that's what your PO is doing, right? In that
that's
meeting.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Yeah, but that's their session. Like, who owns the session? That's kind of where I'm going with this.
It's the PO that owns
who owns the daily Scrum? Well, the team, the developers
team
on the team, actually, the Scrum guide, the developers on the team, Scrum team.
The development team.
I understand. No, it's the Scrum team in the latest guide because the developer is gone. But the developers on the team, we can pull the Scrum guide up if we need to.
Yeah, we'll pull it up.
Pretty sure
the dev team.
Pretty sure it's on my laptop.
Because they say now the dev team includes testers and PAs, whoever else you have on your team. They're all part of the development team. It's not just the developers.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I forgot what I was looking for.
You're looking for the Scrum team.
That's right. Development team versus Scrum team. Daily Scrum.
The Daily Scrum is a 15-minute event for the developers of the Scrum team. So although they tried to standardize and sanitize the language or whatever to appeal to marketing or whatever, whoever else they're trying to sell this to, it still says the developers of the Scrum team. This event is not for the PO or the Scrum Master to ask questions or to do whatever.
For sure, but the developers include your testers too.
They do. Yeah, they do. But they don't include the Scrum Master and they don't include the product owner unless the Scrum Master and product owner have active development tasks that they're developers on.
Both of those guys are optional. Scrum Masters and POs are optional.
That's why I bring this up is because those people are optional. The way the Scrum Guide's written, I don't really know even why I'm using the Scrum Guide as a.
Because we're arguing Agile. That's what we do here.
Because we're arguing about it. Like
all those guys that are doing Kanban are going, we don't care.
Right.
Well, I want to ask a question because we talked about the meetings where we think we could, as a Scrum Master, kind of skip those if we had to, right? Like realistically, in a perfect world, we'd attend all of them if we could.
Sure.
But if we have 3 teams or we have a lot going on, those were the certain ones we could skip. So what do you guys think we are essential at? Like we have to attend these specific events.
I'll jump on this one before Om. Like I see Om, I saw his ears perk up. I saw his ears perk up, and I want to jump on this one. I think you cannot get out of sprint planning. I think sprint planning requires a facilitator.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely requires a facilitator. Even the first part of the sprint planning, where the product owner. You even could say you can get out of the first part of sprint planning that requires a facilitator to say, well, we don't need a facilitator because it's the product owner and the team negotiating to say, this is the goal, these are the items I want to get done, this is the what I want to get done. I would be inclined to have a discussion about whether the Scrum Master is required in that part, but the second part where the developers talk about how they're going to build stuff, I think they need a facilitator in that session.
I think they need a facilitator in the former session you just described too. Here's why.
I could go either way. While I was talking, I was reversing my opinion.
Yeah, like there's dependencies and things like that. Developers may not have thought about that.
Yeah.
There's dependencies in the work they're about to take up. So Scrum Master could ask the question, right? Is there an external dependency or even an internal one before we can deliver this piece of work?
Yeah.
And then they think about it and they go, oh, yeah, we need something from team A or team B,
Yeah.
right? So then it surfaces these things.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes, to your point though, Brian, sprint planning, definitely try not to skip that because it won't go as well. Obviously, the retro goes without saying as a sprint event, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't really fit anywhere, but I had to think about commitment. I read a book recently, Influence, by Robert Cialdini.
I don't know.
Cialdini.
I'm out.
Cialdini. I think it's
Cialdini.
I think it's Cialdini.
It's like
Robert
Italian
Cialdini.
soccer.
He wrote a book called Influence, and one of the things he talks about is marketing schemes where they get you to commit to a small thing. What he was saying was, I can offer you a reward to commit to do something, right? Whatever it is. I can offer you some kind of benefit to committing to do something. And once you commit to it, I can slowly remove pieces of the reward until the reward is not worth it anymore. But because you committed to it in the first place, you still stick to doing it. So like when I listen to that, it's like a whole chapter in the book.
Sounds like manipulation.
It really is. It's a whole chapter. Well, everything he did in that book is backed. He's PhD, so everything he did in that book is backed up by studies. The study basically is to offer you something and to get you to commit to doing something, and then after you start to remove pieces of the reward until basically there's nothing in the reward anymore. So like when I heard that, I translated it to the Scrum team committing to a backlog that's locked in, whatever, 6 items in the backlog or whatever, and that becomes a sprint, and then over time this product owner just like adds stuff and adds stuff and adds stuff, and because they committed and he keeps adding stuff along the way, because the product owner keeps adding stuff, they still feel the same need to commit.
Sure.
Okay, like it's like hacking the human psyche. And I could have swore I read something that they were thinking about taking the word commit out of the Scrum Guide, but I might be wrong. I might have dreamed it for all I know. But that's a super powerful feature of the human psyche, is like getting you to commit to something at the beginning of the sprint, and then when it changes, and when I say changes means I add something, but I do not also equally take out things of the same value. I am now taking advantage of your commitment as the sprint goes on.
All right, so the commitment there is bi-directional.
Are we still
right?
saying commitment?
I don't know what I'm talking about
In lieu
anymore.
of a better word, I guess we could use that.
I thought that word was done, right? We don't say committed anymore. We say forecasted.
We could say that.
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm pulling up the Scrum Guide again.
There's definitely a tacit agreement, let's say, by the team.
It's there?
To say that they will do their best to finish what they committed to or forecasted to, right? But the commitment goes the other way too. The product owner agrees to not disrupt the sprint backlog. So if they're adding to it, then the Scrum Master is not protecting that backlog. They need to do that. They need to say, hey, you're putting something in, how about taking something out about the same size? If you can't do
sounds
that,
familiar.
then, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So all forecasts are off.
But listen, that's still disruptive, right?
Of
Like
course.
if we're in the middle of a sprint and they're like, we need this, it's urgent. And we're like, listen, we already committed to this, it's already midway.
It does
They're like,
happen,
well, take
though.
something else out that you already refined and maybe are working on.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
matter.
It does happen though, right? But it should be very much the exception. Once in a blue moon, that can happen. Just because nobody thought about it, or if some events happen, like for example, there's a trade show and they have to have something that's broken. They have to show that at the trade show. They need your team to fix it. What are you gonna do? You have to fix it. But that shouldn't be sprint in, sprint out. It should be like once in a blue moon. It should be very, very rare. If it's not rare, yeah, that's a bad sign right
Yeah.
there.
Interesting.
There needs to be I don't know. I need to think about committing to something and then having somebody play the little
Switcheroo?
Yeah, play the little game, like the shell game on
Yeah.
you, to be like, oh, you committed to 6 items. A shell game, oh, suddenly it's 15 items, and then you don't realize that like someone's trying to take advantage of you. Yeah,
That's sly. That's conniving. That's not healthy at all. That's
happens
setting
all the time, though.
So that is setting the team up for failure.
yeah, but that happens all the time. The
I
product
know.
owner's like, oh, one more thing. Or actually, not even the product owner. I've seen teams do that to themselves.
Yeah.
We
That's
can
very
do that.
common.
We can
Oh
do that.
yeah, absolutely.
It's
My
that is
offshore team will do that to me.
that's different than completing everything that's in the sprint and then looking at the next thing in the backlog and bringing it up. That is different.
I've noticed this the most with my contractors versus the full-time employees. I think the contractors really want to show their worth and the value they're bringing, so they'll overload themselves. And it's really hard to get them and convince them, like, no, enough's enough. You guys cannot possibly do all of this within 40-hour work week, or else you're burning yourselves out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they won't do it. They'll do it in more than a 40-hour work.
That's right. They will run themselves overtime.
Right.
Yeah.
And leadership doesn't. You can cut this out, but like between us, leadership doesn't care because they're contractors.
We will not cut this out.
They can replace them.
I don't think there's a reason to cut that out. Way back in the podcast, I told a story about leadership being like, you need to offshore more work because we can get more work out of those people in the same for cheaper. And I'm
per
like,
unit time.
I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, but these guys, their teams are living in compounds. And if they get fired from the job, their family gets kicked out of the compound, and like that's basically slave labor. Yeah, it's not slave labor, but it's basically indentured servitude, because if they're not employed at their job, their whole family gets kicked out of their house.
Yeah.
Like, not only no.
You don't want any part of that.
I don't want to be involved with anybody who works like that. Oh, Brian, you're just not a company man. Like you're not thinking about the company.
A team
like,
player.
I hope you left.
No, they fired me.
He didn't have to. Look at the bright side.
Yeah,
he didn't have to stoop down to that level of saying, I'm resigning.
You can't make me quit. You got to fire me. That's like the opposite of, you can't fire me, I quit. Oh, man.
So with my situation with the stand-up, just since we're talking about Scrum events specifically, I pull up the Scrum Guide. I don't think I'm wrong, but they did away with the mandatory 3 questions, right? So this is just...
They did.
Exactly. So this is just, a daily touch point with a team that's beneficial to them so they can collaborate together.
Yeah.
And so when I had this enormous team that they combined of like 26 teams with multiple pods, right? Topic in itself, and we'll discuss later. But I had to make sure that we were staying within our time box. How can we do that? So, we look at just the stories itself, right? We look at the completion, we talk about the blockers and impediments, and we discuss like what needs to be talked about right now, like most important things that need to be discussed, or any questions you have for clarity purposes.
I don't want to promote this topic to number 2 slot, but I told Om before on a previous podcast, in the General McChrystal Team of Teams book, he talks about that he had to reform their process in fighting Al-Qaeda. He had to reform their process where every day he had to get everyone together who had information to share information, and the call ended up being like 2 hours every day. It was like 70 people on the call, but everyone was contributing, and they basically went around. It was like a scrum time, to the nth power. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because the normal people will tell you have to have different layers of scaling, and these teams talk and they send reps to the next team to scale. He didn't do that. He just got literally every team together on one single call, and the call went for a really long time, but he was like, it was completely, all the information is completely exposed, and literally any team can ask questions about anything to any other team, and it all comes out on one call. So I kind of wonder,
seems productive.
I kind of wonder if you're in a situation where leadership has just meddled to collapse your teams together, whether you could treat your daily Scrum call, whether you could treat it like the Team of Teams call, where it's like, we're going to have, like, you guys are all working on different things. We all know that. Leadership doesn't know that. Leadership doesn't know what they're doing, obviously, but we're gonna treat it like, okay, you 3 people are over here working on one thing, and you 6 people over here working on one thing, and you 7 people over here working on one thing, and we're gonna go around logical groups like that. But we're only gonna have one daily Scrum call per day, and it's gonna be the scaled call. So it'll be whatever, I don't know how long it takes you to get through that call, but we're gonna take that long, and we're just gonna go around the room, and we're gonna go, I'll break you into your logical groups based on what you're working on. And you will be separate teams, but as far as leadership knows, you're just one giant 58-person team. But I'm going to handle it in the General McChrystal Team of Teams way, where we just, it requires more time.
It certainly does. So just a rule of thumb, if you say no more than 15 minutes, if you stick by that one, just for argument's sake.
Sure.
And you have, how many, 6 teams you said, or 7? Right? So that's 7 times 15, whatever that is. That's a long time. But the McChrystal way of doing things is good for this reason. you don't lose anything in translation.
Right.
That's the first thing,
Right.
right? That's what happens in a scaled model.
Right.
Where something's said and then somebody repeats that back, and that parroting doesn't quite reflect what was happening,
Right.
and it gets diluted. You know, it's that whole channel of communication model here. So the other benefit of having everybody is, as Brian pointed out, anyone can ask questions of anyone else, which you don't have in that scale model, right? You just don't have that structurally.
Yeah.
In the McChrystal example, I think he goes into it in his second book as well. Why it's important is because it's a life and death situation with these guys, right? Because if they miscalibrate in any way, I mean, literally, it is life and death.
Yeah, they got
right?
operators on the ground.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So and they have people that are protecting those guys, you know, in the forward line. So that's why this was important. Not quite so critical with software development, but equally important if you are the Scrum Master that has so many teams. You gotta think through this. How do you make sure that the teams synchronize? That's the reason behind it. So just to go back to the point you made about the 3 questions that are now deprecated, of course, right? One of the things I tell people to kind of do is, or encourage them to do, I should say, is at the daily stand-up, forget about what you did yesterday. Nobody cares. That's history, right? Forget about what you're going to do today, because that's not a guarantee. You plan on it. That's your plan. It may not turn out to be reality, right?
Sure.
So you had to go pick up your kid from school. Your plan's already upset. So we don't care about all that. What we care about is look at the story, to your point, and looking at the story and go, okay, as a team, whoever's working on that story, what is preventing you from moving that story from this column to the column to its right?
Yeah.
So if it's in doing, what's stopping us from getting it to done?
Yeah.
Just talk about that. Tackle the problem, not the people. Right?
Yeah.
Because you get the quiet ones that say nothing. I have no impediments. At the end of the sprint, their tasks are still undone.
In the spirit of arguing Agile, that assumes that this collapsing of teams altogether is done on some kind of product line, and it isn't done completely in a ludicrous manner where you have many, many different disparate products that have nothing to do with each other, and they're completely firewalled. If you have somebody producing some mobile app for this customer, somebody producing some web app for this customer, and somebody's doing something else, like if that's the point, and literally no other team even has any visibility, like responsibility, interaction at all to some other products some of the teams working on, they're really going to be sitting there bored on the call the whole time.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring that up is because in the McChrystal book was exactly like this. It's like if you're stuck in this position and it happens to be one backlog, lapse all the calls together and just knock it all out in one, and you're kind of throwing the Scrum Guide out the window for a second.
For sure.
But I'm not against throwing the Scrum Guide out the window, because you're still going to be walking the board. You're still going to be starting and saying, okay, everything in the whatever your rightmost column before it's done is on the board. I don't know what it is. Like for me, this stuff's about to be deployed into production.
That's what we have to.
Okay, if you're walking this stuff's about to be deployed column, you walk straight down the deployed column and be like, okay, team A, you have something that's about to be deployed. Tell me what's going to take to get to that next step. You know, okay, well, I'm waiting on this. I'm waiting on a review, whatever we go through it. Maybe that conversation involves maybe somebody from your team and somebody from like a dev lead position or something, because they got to do a PR or something. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, waiting on an approval or whatever.
And then you jump way down the board to a lower story to be like, oh, this next thing looks like it's be ready to deploy. That's some other team and some other part of the business. Okay, then you walk to the ready to deploy column.
Yeah.
And then maybe the next thing back to ready to deploy column is like, I don't know, the in testing column or something. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. In testing column, now you're gonna have a lot of QA people having input on the call. So you're gonna walk down the whole. That's probably a great way to deal with this. All my teams have been collapsed together because management doesn't know what they're doing. Like, cool, I'll take control of the call as the facilitator, and we're gonna have a cross-team discussion of what it takes to move things forward. Call. Rather than what are you working on today? Like,
who cares?
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like that's a very unproductive conversation.
I feel challenged with that question too. It's like, they're questioning, so I better have something. So I'm going to say I'm working on rebuilding this index. Like, how's that adding value?
The whole time you're waiting for your turn to come up, and then you're struggling to think of something to justify, and then like, forget all that, man. Like,
you don't need that.
Yeah, you don't need all that. Like, what can you contribute to the larger?
That's right.
Ecosystem. Talk about the work and then move on. A lot of people will stay silent. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm testing this. The developer's about to deploy it. He's going to answer for me. I don't need to talk. Yeah. Or maybe 2 developers swarmed on it. Now, they don't both need to talk. Only one of them needs to talk. So there are ways to go about this.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, I think it's so much more productive. When I was first getting started as a Scrum Master, there were so many Agile coaches who had different ways of doing this,
Yes.
right? I remember specifically, I got 2 contradicting ways of doing a stand-up. One person was saying, like, do away with the questions.
No.
Just like make sure you can even go longer. If it's a good conversation, let them talk this out, right? So like he had that perspective, and the other was like, no, you say the questions. You go round robin, each person. They got to do it.
Yikes.
Right. And then they would sit in my call and then observe if I was doing what they had mentioned me to do. I don't know. To me, the first approach was kind of more productive, right? Yeah. It's for the team. They were having these conversations that were fluid and that were helpful to each other versus just like sticking by the script.
Yeah, you throw away the script, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
The script doesn't take into account one fundamental thing, which is all the teams are at different levels of maturity. You're a brand new team. They may need a bit more attention. You still don't need the script now, but for you to kind of bring them in line and say, this is how we're going to conduct ourselves. People that have been working in an Agile way, they already know. They probably appreciate the freedom from the shackles of all this stuff. So yeah, it just depends.
Anybody who comes in and torpedoes your psychological safety, like your PO should be the first person to be like, get out of here. Like,
Really? The PO?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I always assumed it was the Scrum Master.
The PO really owns the product increment. They're telling the stakeholder, I'm going to take this team of X number of people, spend 2 weeks, and deliver this. So whatever's stopping from that delivery, the PO should be like, okay, stop, right? We have to protect the team. Yeah, the Scrum Master day to day, absolutely, but the PO should be the first person. But they're not aware usually because they're not necessarily there to see the disruption, right? That's happening. That's where the Scrum Master comes in. So that could also be something you could say, Brian, when someone says, "What do you do all day?"
Did you like that role?
Scrum Master?
Yeah.
No, Scrum Master's terrible. It's a terrible role.
Like from
Nobody
the
should do that.
Usually goes with that.
Right, but well now, and I don't know if it's because he's jaded after how many years, but like realistically, you've been in this space for a long time, you played different roles, now you end up as a Scrum Master. So the initial thought when you ended up in that role, you didn't like it?
The initial thought is I didn't like it being a Scrum Master?
I'm asking.
No, the initial thought of being a Scrum Master is that I can help the team members not repeat mistakes and kind of advance them through get them out of some of the ruts that I would get stuck in, and I can help them. And you do, because you can see some of these blockers coming before they happen. And generally, that's what I would try to do, to head things off that I see coming before they impact the team.
Yeah.
That's the hope. Now the reality of that, and I've said this many times before, so this is should not be a shock to anyone ever, which is in the Scrum Master role. When you ask me, Brian, what does it take to unblock my team? What does it take to take my team to a next level of effectiveness and efficiency and whatever? I can tell you what it is. And I can even dream up a future state for you and kind of tell you what you're going to encounter in the future. Yeah. And more than likely, you will encounter what I tell you that you're going to encounter. You will deal with that in the future. However, in the role of Scrum Master, most people will tell you, like, oh, well, Brian, I understand you're telling me what the future's going to look like, but I need you to give me some metrics and tell me what some other people do, and then give me 3 options, and then I'm framing this as my contracting experience. Because usually I was dealing with people who came from the business. Oh, boy. I don't even know how deep we're going to get into this one. Usually I would be dealing with product owners who came with domain experience but had no software development experience, as opposed to people who came up through software development and then gathered domain experience.
That's a
as
podcast
part
by
of
itself.
I have so many questions.
It is a podcast all itself. The podcast that I'm talking about now is how do people become product owners / managers? There are only 2 routes to become product owners / product manager. There are 3, but we won't talk about the third one because it's nearly impossible to just get hired out of college to become a product manager. Congratulations, you graduated college. Welcome to your first day at McKinsey & Company. You're now a product manager.
Go develop a model or 2.
Almost never happens. Yeah, right.
It happens as a BA and they work their way up, right?
But I count a BA. I count as coming from product development. Coming from software development realm. Because you either come from the field Meaning, this is a terrible example. I'm only going to use terrible examples. Let's say you're in the oil and gas industry, and you're used to going out and working on oil platforms and setting them up and managing them, and you now come in house, and my team is just developing software to help people go out and set up oil and gas platforms. You're an expert at the business of setting up oil and gas platforms.
Right.
So anything that the team could ask you in the business domain of how people engage in setting up oil and gas platforms work, you can answer that question. Even if you can't specifically answer that question, you have deep insight into what goes on, and you can figure out the answer. Reach out to people, do some investigation, stuff like that. That's one side. And then you figure that out, and then you come in and work with a development team and figure out along the way how best to develop software. That's one side. The other side of product people are people who came up through development teams. They started as a BA, they started in QA, they started as a developer, they started as whatever, maybe even a project manager.
Sure.
And they figured out how generally development teams work, and somehow they got hired on, and the company that got hired on works in this other domain that they're not familiar with, and they have no idea how it works, and they have to learn the business, but they know generally how the development team wants to get stuff done. So those are the two ways people get into product from my perspective.
I find that fascinating. Do you agree?
I agree, but there's a third way that he said we wouldn't talk about. I'm just going to say why I wouldn't talk about it, because that is fraught with danger. That path is riddled with obstacles. When you pick somebody up and go, okay, there you go, you're now a product owner, right?
It's not like we've never seen it. I can name places we've seen.
We've never seen it be successful. At least I haven't. What I've seen is people struggle, and then they give the profession a bad name. And go, product ownership sucks. Seriously, I've seen that because they don't know how to do it.
Said nobody ever.
Exactly, right? Said nobody ever. Because they've been put in this situation to fail. That's the problem, and it's not their fault. These are people that have no business being in that situation, but they were.
But they represent the business, right?
They do, but they were put in that situation, right? So they didn't come from one path or the other. They came, more likely, they came straight out of college. Or what I've seen in big firms is this. They go on this rotation, the tour of duty.
Right. Yes.
So they go, we're going to take somebody. This is a model that goes back to the 70s, by the way, right? This is what used to happen in the 70s. You pick somebody bright and young and go do an MBA. As soon as they come out, this guy is really sharp, but he really doesn't know about the business. So what we're going to do is we're going to have him spend 3 months here, 3 months there, 3 months there. And at the end of the year or whatever, after his tour of duty's done, we're going to ordain him an expert in one of them. We'll pick one for him, right? So then they say, well, see, you did great in HR. This poor guy is now an HR expert. He's got an MBA to back it up, but his MBA is not in HR. He's got 3 months just looking over someone's shoulder. So that happens with product ownership. I have, and you have, seen this.
Yes, we
So
did.
people are on secondment. And again, it's not their fault. I gotta say that it's not their fault. They're in this situation where they're supposed to be the product owner and they have no idea how to do the role.
But they acted like they did.
Yeah, that's a difference.
No software development idea or no domain expertise idea.
Yes, both.
Oh,
because they're on a tour of duty, right? So they've just
trying to work with you here, man.
I know, but it's
And it falls onto the Agile coach to train him up, right?
absolutely, and it doesn't always work. Let's just say that.
A topic we probably could have touched on too in that first one was like, how do you communicate to leadership that you're more valuable than just the facilitator of these meetings?
That goes back to number one on this list, why the Scrum Master is or is not required in meetings. Part of the Scrum Master's job, and I gave someone this advice, and they're like, Brian, that's terrible advice. And I was like, no, it is great advice. Your job is to know everybody else's job so you can help them when they don't know what their job is. Like if you have a product person and they come in and they obviously don't have domain experience and they obviously don't know how to work with the software development team, at least you can help them work with the software development team.
Right.
And maybe you can help them figure out who from the business they need to start collecting things from and how to do discovery work.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help them do that stuff.
You should be able to now legitimately, right? Because the Scrum Guide now
You're
says...
allowed to say legit.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, there you go.
Legit.
Legit. As a Scrum Master, you are empowered to go and help your product owner get whatever they need, whether it's insight in how to develop software or insight on the business side. Because guess what? One of the roles of a Scrum Master, as of the 2020 Scrum Guide, is to coach the organization and to coach the product owner, both. So you're coaching the team, you're coaching the product owner, and you're coaching the organization. Those three things go together.
Jump in, Jessica. I see you on the fence.
I just have so many questions, and I don't doubt that it's in the Scrum Guide, right? I'm pulling up. But like
It's not in the job description.
Yeah, it's not in the job description that we like operate at an organizational level. That's when the Agile coaches come
Own
in.
it.
But
Own it.
No.
Seriously,
Now,
own it.
The conversation we're having now is the Scrum Guide says it's your job as a Scrum Master to coach the organization. All right. The way that I interpret that, and even though I'm working against the system, it's my job to tell the organization there are certain things the team needs from you, the organization. I forgot where I was going with this.
No, you keep going though. So
Yeah, you're
the
now
Scrum Master
operating
should
at an
not pick up their
organizational
pig
level.
iron and leave.
I got a little too relaxed in this conversation.
Well, I mean,
Gang boss.
I was gonna say, like, with the Scrum Masters being obligated sometimes by like leadership to say, like, well, your value comes from you being in the meetings. Like, how would they have the time to be like, at an organizational level, let me help you guys?
Yeah.
How do you get in there?
Yeah. The value of the Scrum Master comes from the fact that you have a permanent change agent who represents the development team working their way through the organization. So the idea, we were talking about this last night, Om, about the Scrum Master being trained in Kanban practices
That's right.
first, before they step into their role. Because the concept that we were talking about last night was when you step into your role as Scrum Master, you have the team, and you do your Scrum practices, and you work with your one. Pretend for a second you have one team. Just one team. I know it's difficult.
I can't imagine it.
I know. When you have one team, you really have two teams.
Yeah.
Your two teams are your individual Scrum team you're working with and the Kanban team that is a leadership team that is the direct above you
Absolutely.
organizational unit that brings work to you or does your budgeting or decides who to hire and fire on your team, whoever that hierarchy is that you're plugged into. All those people together are a team. Whether they want to be or not, they are a team in the organization.
Absolutely.
So your job as a Scrum Master, you don't realize it, but you've inherited the direct team above you. They will not be a team on paper, but they are a team.
They are, and it's your responsibility to handle that as a team.
Yeah, you own.
You own it.
I don't
That's
want to
what
say.
That's
I
what
don't
I
want to
meant
say.
when I said own it.
I don't want to say handle because that's a weird term.
That is
handle.
weird.
But you
Manage.
You.
It's also a bad word.
Yeah, manage.
Yeah,
There's not a good.
absolutely.
Yeah, there's not a good term. Yeah.
Influence.
Own it.
Right? The influence.
You got to own it.
I like influence. I like manage. I like deal
You
with.
like manage?
Like, I like-
don't think people like those things.
I like. There's a lot of different terms, but if you have not taken ownership of them, they will run all over you.
They will. It'll be chaos. So the reason why you're doing that is to make sure that their work is transparent and they're accountable for their work, right? You're holding them. That's right. You're holding them accountable for their work. And you do that best using something like a Kanban. So you create a board with things on it and
Yes.
you make them owners of
Yeah.
those things and you hold their feet to the fire and say, you are doing this. How's that going?
Yep.
Right? That's basically what you have to do as a Scrum Master. That in a nutshell is you coaching the organization. So you've got to, my way of saying it is own it. That's yours. Own it. Most
Unless
Scrum
you-
Masters don't do that, by the way. They look just downwards into the team that they have,
yeah.
the dev team. But they need to be looking upwards as well, because that is your role as a Scrum Master too.
I do believe that most don't look upward.
Yeah. And that helps you answer that question, right? When they say, what do you do all day? It's
Well,
like, you know what I do.
well, you're too
I'm making
busy.
sure you're doing your stuff
Yeah,
too.
yeah, but if you have three teams, you're too busy in the day to deal with. Like, I gotta look at dude. 3 teams is a 60% overhead. I hope I said
That's
that right.
right. You did.
It's,
You did.
Yeah, okay.
20% of teams.
Yeah, 3 teams is a
Switching
is
costs.
60%. Oh, that's a lot of overhead. And the 60% overhead does not include refinements, because that's outside of the model.
That's right.
Yeah, so like that's a lot of demand on your time, and that does not count the shadow team of the leadership above you. So 80% overhead. If you're gonna have scaled events, 80% overhead now.
Right.
That like 80% overhead?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's got to be a silver lining somewhere, right? So one of the things you can do as a result of all this is to illustrate to them in no uncertain terms that all this overhead is what you're doing. This is what you do day in, day out. And it's not right because you have, you know, gazillion teams and all of this. On top of that, you have to manage that team. I'll use the word loosely, manage. But
Influence.
that's what you do. You think your teams aren't self-organizing and self-managing? Yeah, wait till you get to that level. They're absolutely not, because they don't want to be influenced or managed by the Scrum Master.
But in that instance, leadership doesn't know that their lead level people are just like chicken with their head cut off, just working on the latest fire, just running around. You know, so like you need like the Scrum Master on the team, where they really justify their role. They need to partner with whoever's at the head of the organization, whatever that is. Like if the organization is like, if you're all under the development banner and the head of the organization is the director of development or VP of CTO or some CIO, something like that, then you need to work with. You need to climb all the way up to that level to be like, listen, all of your teams, all of your, like, if you have like development leads or technical leads,
even architects
that span all of your teams, like you need to put them together into a team, and then I will visualize to you what they're working on. And you need to climb the corporate ladder to a certain point to be like, like how can I help visualize what work is happening? Because you have no idea what your leadership level people, solution architects, dev leads, QA leads, whatever, you have no idea what they're working on, spanning all the projects that you have going on. Because let's be honest, in an environment like this, they're doing projects.
That's right.
Okay, how can I, Scrum Master on one team, how can I help you visualize all this stuff? And they'll say, oh, well, actually, if I did have a Kanban that showed me what all these people were working on, even if it was just one sentence, I would completely understand that. Like, if you visualize the work quickly, you will quickly identify, dev lead Bob has 5 tasks work in progress, and dev lead Jim has 25. And like, I got a big problem.
Like, see where the bottlenecks
Jim is overloaded.
Well, you can see this in dashboards too, right?
Yeah, but lead level usually doesn't have a dashboard. Usually they float above teams. Like the team has a dashboard, but dev lead Bob is not dedicated to any individual team. His work will not be included in the team's dashboard.
Ego management.
Right.
Yeah,
So you're
down, steal your lunch, poop all over the place.
Yeah. So I guess I'm advising cutting 2 levels over your management. So your direct management of your team, you're cutting 2 levels to pull together some kind of executive level Kanban, but at like your lowest org level. To say,
above your team, though.
Yeah, above your team. Yeah. But your lead should have that anyway, and they're doing a huge disservice to whoever they work for, not like just being like, I'm working on job. Trust me, I'm working on the most valuable thing. Just trust me.
But that's where you shine. That's where you show your value. You know, so that it makes defunct these questions like, what do you do? I've got my team, the development team, plus I'm helping at the leadership level.
That's where the Scrum Master shows their values. And that's to bring us all back to the reason we brought this up was we had a conversation last night about should all the Scrum Masters have some kind of Kanban exposure? And the answer is yes. Because otherwise you don't understand that there's a whole theory of constraints and there's a whole bottleneck thing going on, and your team is caught in all that. Okay, the bubble of agility cannot start and end with your team, and then you ignore the rest of the organization. You need to bring the organization into the bubble of agility.
Mine's the opposite metaphor, which is expand the bubble and engulf the leadership. Awesome. Oh, this was a very interesting podcast. Thank you for being our return guest.
Yeah.
And thank you all for
Secret
staying
guest.
with us this far, both of you. Smash that like button.
Oh no! I do that every time. I want the channel to get discovered authentically, organically, or whatever.
Both.
Theoretically, physically.
Hopefully.
Such a great word, truncate.